So let's do a proof that will give you an example of what I'm talking about. So here's an example of a proof. So we're given this diagram. This is A, this is D, this is M, this is C, and this is B. And we're told the following information. This is like the given. We're told that AB, segment AB, and segment CD bisect each other at M. And we need to prove that angle A is congruent to angle B. Now, all the times that we've done these proofs, we've had to prove that two triangles are congruent to each other. But based on what we learned right up here, we can now take it a step further and first prove that two triangles are congruent, and then conclude that the corresponding sides, like A and B, are congruent. So our first job is to somehow prove that these are congruent to each other, these two triangles, and then to prove that angle A is congruent to angle B. Now I'm going to sit here and kind of just try to figure out what postulates I'm going to use. We're given this information. AB and CD bisect each other. And bisect means that it splits the segment into two equal parts. So if DC bisects AB at M, that means that AM is then equal or congruent to BM. And it also says that AB and CD bisect each other, so AD also bisects DC, or splits it into two equal halves. So then we can conclude that DM is congruent to MC. And then we see that these two triangles share kind of similar angles, and we can say that angle AMD is congruent to angle CMB because of vertical angles. And so I see a side here, I see an included angle, and I see a side here. So we are going to prove that these triangles are congruent using side angle side. And then we're going to, based on proving that these two triangles are congruent, we can then prove that angle A is congruent to angle B because they're corresponding angles. So I'm going to write this proof, and I just want you to copy this down and follow along. So again, just like we set up all our other proofs, we do our statements on the left side and our reasons. And again, we're trying to build up a case for why angle A and angle B are congruent. So our first statement is always to do the given. So we are given that AB and CD bisect each other. And the reason why we know this is because it's given. And now we want to start building up our case for side, angle, side. I'm going to start off with the first sides that are congruent right here. And I know that AM is congruent to BM. The reason why I know this is because it goes back to what's given. CD bisects AB. So the reason why we know this is because it's the definition of a segment bisector. Bisect means that it's splitting it in half, and so that's how we know that they're two equal parts or they're congruent to each other.
What's Tony doing right now?
And now we need to, in our next corresponding part, or excuse me, we need to prove now that these two angles are congruent. And we know that angle AMD is congruent to angle BMC. And the reason why we know this is because of vertical angle theorem.
It's kind of right at you now.
So now we have our angle, and now we're looking to prove our second side, DM and MC. So we know that DM is congruent to CM. And again, the reason why we know this is because of our given information. We know that AB bisects DC.
Tell me good.
And so because it's a bisector, the reason why we know that DM is equal to CM is because it's the definition of a segment bisector.
I'll move you up on you. Never mind apologetic.
Okay, so now we have our side.
Okay.
Because we have enough information, side, angle, side, we now know that triangle AMD is congruent to triangle
Oh.
BMC. Of course, the reason for this is side, angle, side, congruence postulate.
Let's catch you next year.
And remember, we're trying to prove that angle A is congruent to angle B. Because we just proved that these two triangles are congruent, we now can prove that any of the matching or corresponding angles are then congruent. So we can go ahead and now say angle A is congruent to angle B.
Oh, we all died.
And the reason why we know this is because corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent.
Yeah.
Now, remember this phrase. It's really important. Whenever you're having to prove that angles are congruent to each other in triangles, or sides are congruent in triangles, you're going to probably, most likely, always end up with this saying this phrase. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent.